There's one very specific thing you can change about your punch technique that will 10x your power. And it's not something that's really talked about that much, at least. Maybe in the pros it's talked about, but it's definitely not talked about in the amateurs or shown any beginners. So consider this secret knowledge. As I'm sure you know, amateur boxing is all about scoring as many points as possible. And it's not so much about trying to do a lot of damage, whereas professional boxing is all about doing as much damage as possible because it's going to go over much more rounds. So you can't just tap and run away. You need to be able to stand your ground and deliver powerful shots and hopefully get the stoppage if you want it to not be a long night. And particularly when boxers transition from amateurs over to professionals, they learn a very specific skill. First of all, that's sitting down on their punches a bit more, being more planted and not bouncing around as much, because again, you can't just bounce around for 10 rounds straight. So you need to know how to sit down on your punches, defend with your guard, and move your head a little bit more than instead of just moving out of range all the time. But more importantly, they need to learn how to turn over their knuckles. You might know this, but it's common sense. If you land your punch with a flat fist like this, or you slap like this, like on the second knuckles, it does like 10 times less damage than if you turn over the knuckles and actually land on the knuckles like this, okay? This does 10 times less damage than this, okay? You can see the small adjustment that I'm making here. And I'm going from this to this. I'm kinking my wrist by like, I don't know, 5 degrees or something. And that small kinking of the wrist allows me to turn over the knuckles and land. Okay, that's not the only adjustment, but why does landing on the knuckles cause such a big power increase? Well, there's much less pressure, much less surface area for all of that force from your swing to go into. And when there's less surface area, i.e. just your knuckles, then there's a lot more pressure and a lot more force transferred into the target, which means if you can land and dig in the knuckles, that you can put 10 times as little effort into a punch and get 10 times as much out of it. So that's basically what you want to try and implement. Now, there's 2 ways to implement this. The first one I already talked about is kinking the wrist slightly. So just a small little kink of the wrist. And the best way I've found to do this in your training and therefore in your fights is by being in your guard and having your wrists already slightly kinked like this. If they're already slightly kinked, by the time you turn them over, you can see that I'm landing on the knuckles first. All right. Also, it helps if you're throwing hooks like this, you have to turn or kink the wrist a lot more to be able to get the knuckles on. But if you can swing your arm around, throw more of a swinging hook, then you can have your palm facing down, and it's much easier to get the knuckles on. There's much more knockout power in that, okay? Although I know a lot of people say, swear by this, I've always found this is much easier to do a lot more damage with a lot less effort by just swinging your arm and letting the knuckles land first. I find that's better, but whichever one you find more comfortable. So the first way is kinking the wrist. The second way is you've got to be a good judge for how much you bend your arm depending on the range that you're throwing a punch. So if I'm throwing a long range hook, for example, then I want to bend my arm, okay, but not so much that it lands flat or too much that it obviously misses, okay? So you want to imagine where the target is. Let's say it's here. The angle of that target is like this. Okay, you want to angle your elbow and your wrist so by the time it gets there, it's like this. Okay, there's a slight angle where the knuckles are coming on first. All right, so you've got to be able to judge that. And the way you get good at doing that is obviously just practicing on the bag, on the pads, or, I mean, you don't really practice it in sparring. It's something that happens naturally after a bunch of repetitions. So that's the next thing I'm going to talk about. You basically want to practice on the bag, finding that right angle where the knuckles connect. And then you want to do a shitload of repetitions, starting with the wrist kinked in your guard, where you're always just digging your knuckles in. And when you do that, you don't have to put literally any power in. You just put your hand in position and you just twist your body like this. By the time it lands on the knuckles, it does way more damage. And I can feel anytime I put someone down or done any damage to anyone, it's because I've turned the knuckles over and I've felt it land on the knuckles, and my knuckles actually sting when it lands. That means you've thrown a good punch, regardless of whether you got a lot of momentum behind it or not. If you could literally throw a punch from here, if it's timed right and it lands on the knuckles, a tiny little dig like this with your body behind it can knock someone out pretty easy. So that's basically the power secret. It's got nothing to do with being stronger. It's got nothing to do with tension in your body and trying to swing. It's got nothing to do with that. It's all got to do with how articulate you can be with the impact of your punches. And the more you are, the better you've trained it, then the more knockout power you'll have, basically. The technique I've explained in this video, lander on the knuckles, has the ability to accelerate you from being a complete novice to being pretty good quite quick. Because if you've got power, it can take you a long way. People can always outpoint you, all right? But if you just land that one big shot, or you land a couple big shots right on the knuckles as you practice that technique, then you've always got that puncher's chance. If you've always got that puncher's chance, and if you look at people like Fabio Wardley, look how far he's gone with not as great technique as other boxers, but just the raw ability to knock people out, then you can go pretty far with just power. So if you can match that progression with power with your progression, the technical side of boxing, then I can guarantee you'll go pretty far. And I made a video explaining how you can accelerate your progress as fast as possible, shortest amount of time if you need to catch up, if you feel like you're a late starter. And that video should be linked on the screen somewhere now, so go give that a watch. I'll see you there. Goodbye.